You are listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality, the podcast where ancient wisdom meets modern vitality. If you are seeking to reconnect with your innate vibrancy, you're in the right place. I'm Emily Davis, a seasoned holistic esthetician and herbalist. Join me as we unlock the secrets of ancient skincare practices, explore the beauty of seasonal and nature-based living, herbalism, and true holistic well-being for you and the broader ecosystem. This podcast is brought to you by Stratum Aesthetics. Head to stratumaesthetics.com to find curated skincare, body care, and other wellness products hand-selected by me. Now enjoy the show. Please remember that the information I share in this podcast is based on my personal and professional experience and is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not individualized skincare advice, nor is it medical advice. I encourage you to take charge of your own health decisions and listen to your body, seeking out the resources and professionals that best support your wellness journey. Welcome back into Skin, Earth, Vitality. I just turned 39 this past week and I took the whole week off as I do every single year. Sometimes I travel, sometimes I just stay home and get like a very much needed mid-year reset. And so that's what I did this year. And all week, I had it on my mind to put together a podcast episode about my 40 before 40 list, which is a list of 40 things that I want to do by 40. And I was like, okay, let's just put the list together first, and then you can outline the process so that other people can follow what you're doing. And for some reason, I just had so much resistance to this. And I just didn't want to do it. And so I decided to just listen to that message. Maybe that list is just for me. I do encourage you that if that sounds fun to you, to create a birthday list for yourself, no matter what age you're at. Because I do believe your birthday is like a personal New Year's, your solar return. I think there's so much magic and wisdom there. But I decided to just keep it off the podcast. And instead, I woke up this morning so pumped to talk about my thoughts on Botox. And I haven't talked about Botox, I don't think at all on the podcast yet, even though I've been meaning to, and I have many thoughts. So it just feels timely to talk about this for me personally as I celebrate turning another year older. So I just thought this would be a good time to share my thoughts on Botox or any other neurotoxin injections from a holistic lens. And spoiler alert, if you're new here, I am not a fan. So if you are someone who does get cosmetic injections or you're an injector and you're someone who gets very easily triggered by somebody sharing that they don't think it's a great idea, this episode probably is not for you. This episode was designed for those who do get Botox and are wondering what it's doing to their body, or somebody who's considering getting it but wants to understand it better. Or if you're an esthetician listening and you work with clients and you want to understand it a little bit better, especially from a holistic lens, this episode is for you. I'm certainly not here to convince anyone of what they should do with their body. I don't really care to be in convincing energy. I don't find it very interesting. And so that's not what this is about. You do whatever you need to do for yourself. And I'm just going to share what I think about Botox from my experience, from my lens. And I do want to start by talking about what I even mean by a holistic lens, because I do say that often. And I think that word holistic has gotten very trendy, and there are some positive things about that becoming very trendy. And I do think that there are some negative things, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page of understanding that holistic, in my eyes, does not mean you're just using products marketed as natural, or you're switching from retinol to some plant-based alternative to retinol, or switching out pharmaceuticals for supplements. I'm not talking about doing the same thing as before, but just swapping in like a trendy plant-based version. In my eyes, that is not holism. Holism is about relationship. It's about seeing our body as part of an interconnected system, not just internally, but with the world around us. And zooming out and looking at the body as this intelligent, interconnected system means understanding that what shows up on the surface, like on our skin, isn't random. It's not just some cosmetic freak event. It's information that our body is communicating. And that communication does not happen in isolation, but instead it's shaped by what we eat and how we sleep and our nervous system, our stress, our relationships, our environment as a whole, like the air that we're breathing and the water that we're drinking. And in this specific instance, even our relationship to ourselves, especially with aging. And I feel like the word holistic has been kind of co-opted to mean like quote unquote clean or non-toxic or like green beauty, people will often say. And I do think that those things can be a piece of the puzzle, but they are not the whole picture. A truly holistic approach is ecological, and it means respecting our body's own intelligence rather than overriding it or silencing it, and instead supporting the natural processes and the healing capacity that our body does have. And part of that means actually believing in your body's healing capacity. So I'm reading this book right now called Holistic Medicine and the Extracellular Matrix by herbalist Matthew Wood. And it is one of the best books that I have read in a long time when it comes to herbalism and healing. And it does read like a textbook. I will warn you, it is a little bit dry. But Matthew Wood is an educator in this space, and I have very much enjoyed reading his books. He has another fantastic book that I love called Vitalism. And in this book, the Extracellular Matrix book, he talks about how the foundation of life isn't actually the cell, which is what's widely believed in the biomedical reductionist model. But instead, it's actually the environment that the cell lives in. And that environment is the extracellular matrix, which is like this gel-like connective network that surrounds every single cell in our body. And it's how our cells get nutrients and eliminate waste and how they communicate with each other. And I bring this up just to give a little substance to what I'm talking about with a holistic viewpoint, because for a long time, medicine has focused on the cell being the main unit of life. And if something was wrong, we tried to fix it or replace the cell. But a holistic model recognizes if you don't treat the terrain that the cell lives in, the cell cannot function properly. And there's even research to show that if you put a cancer cell into a healthy extracellular matrix, it can start behaving like a normal cell again. And that tells us that the disease isn't just about what's wrong inside of the cell, it's about that environment. And this is the basis for holistic medicine, not singling out a specific part that needs to be fixed and then attacking the so-called problem, but actually addressing the terrain of the entire being. And so that brings me back to Botox, because when we're injecting something like Botox, we are not supporting the terrain. We're instead interrupting it. We are freezing communication by paralyzing muscle function. And so from that terrain perspective, that's a big red flag. It's the total opposite of holistic. So instead of listening to the body, we're just completely overriding it. And Botox works. Like, it's very good at its job. It stops the wrinkle from forming on the surface, but it does this by cutting off nerve signals and restricting circulation and disrupting the natural expression of the face. So we're just completely suppressing what's happening within the face. And suppression often comes at a cost. So maybe that's stagnation in the fascia, or blocked lymphatic flow, or a deeper imbalance that eventually will find another way to express itself. So that's what I want to get into with you today. I want to talk about what Botox is, where it comes from, what it does in the body, the impacts on the terrain, what a boxed warning or a black box warning is, the energetic and psychological considerations, and then I will, of course, get into quote unquote alternatives, which I actually talk about more as an antidote rather than an alternative. So we'll start with what Botox is. It's called botulinum toxin type A, and it's a purified and diluted neurotoxic protein that's produced by a bacterium called Clostridium botulinum. And this is the same bacteria responsible for botulism, which is an illness that can cause full body paralysis and even death. And I always think, every time I think about botulism, I remember back in home ec when it was very important to talk about never buying canned food that was bulging or puffy, because it may contain the bacteria that causes botulism, which is this same bacteria which produces the protein botulinum toxin, which is what's being injected. This is also where there's such strict guidelines around home canning. When I first got into canning, it was very strict about the rules of canning. Like, you have to specifically follow a canning recipe, especially with low acid food like meat. They have to be pressure canned instead of hot water bath canned to prevent the growth of this specific bacteria, because even small amounts can paralyze your diaphragm and kill you by suffocating you if eaten. Not to scare you away from canning, it's a really fun activity. But I digress. So when people say you're injecting botulism into your face, that's not quite accurate. You're not actually injecting the disease. You're injecting the toxin that causes the disease, potentially, and it's been purified and used in a much smaller, controlled dose. And it's often talked about how botulinum toxin is the most toxic substance known to science. And they know this because scientists use something called lethal dose 50 to figure out how toxic something is. And that just means the amount of a substance that it takes to kill half of the group that they're testing it on, which would be lab animals. And so the smaller amount that it takes to do that, the more toxic the substance is. And the one that takes the smallest amount to kill half of the lab animals is this botulinum toxin. So that's why it's considered the most toxic substance currently. Even the amount smaller than a speck of dust can kill an adult. But obviously, people aren't just dropping dead left and right. That's not what I'm saying, but I am just shedding light onto what it actually is and why it's called the most toxic substance. Because as far as I've seen, they're not including those types of things in the marketing. And I do think that informed consent means that you fully understand that. It is used in tiny amounts. It's purified. Most people tolerate it fine, especially in the short term. Not everyone. And there are a lot of Botox injuries that do not get talked about or acknowledged. If this is something you're interested in exploring further, you might check out the Instagram handle Never Talks. She also is on other platforms. I think she's on YouTube. She has a website, but she works to share the adverse effects of Botox. And so even the FDA does recognize that there are adverse effects. In 2009, they added what's called a boxed warning or a black box warning to all botulinum toxin products, including Botox. So this boxed warning is the strongest warning that the FDA can issue. It's what's used when there's a serious risk of disability or death. And in the case of Botox, this warning was added because the toxin has been shown to spread beyond the injection site in some people. And so that means even though you're just getting this injected into your forehead or your jaw or whatever, the toxin can migrate into other parts of the body, sometimes causing symptoms like trouble swallowing, difficulty breathing, botulism-like paralysis. And I don't want this to be a fear-mongering episode. So if you want to learn more about adverse effects, I do highly recommend going and checking out Never Talks. There's another Instagram account that I follow called Botox and Fillers Side Effects. Another one called Botox Truths. So these are all Instagram handles that you can follow to learn more about potential side effects. But this boxed warning is the FDA's strongest warning. It's only used when a drug or a medical product carries a serious risk of severe side effects. It means that the risk is serious enough that doctors and patients need to be clearly warned every single time a product is prescribed or used. And do I think that people are truly informed about the boxed warning when they get Botox? Based on my 18 years of working with people and talking to them about their faces and what they're doing to their face, no, I do not. It is usually buried in a consent form, mentioned in passing. It's almost always downplayed because that's not great for business. In my mind, the whole vibe around Botox is quick, very casual, very image focused. It's framed like you're just getting a little touch up, not like you're being injected with a substance that comes with the FDA's most serious warning. And to me, that disconnection is highly dangerous, especially if we care about informed consent and body sovereignty. And I do think that that's part of a much larger conversation, that we are so divorced from ourselves and our own authority and autonomy that we just believe someone else and put all of our trust into this person that we have put in this authority position because they are wearing scrubs or a white coat. And that's not to say I think all doctors are bad. I just think that we need to hold our own authority over our own body instead of always outsourcing it. And unfortunately, it's not really mostly doctors who are the ones doing injections. Sometimes this is someone who's taken a weekend course. I don't know, I could go down this road forever, but I'll stop there. So let's take a step back and talk about how this is affecting the terrain. If we're looking at the body through a holistic lens, Botox just does not make a lot of sense to me because the terrain is everything that surrounds and then supports our cells. So things like that extracellular matrix that I was talking about. Also the fascia, our connective tissue. The lymph, the nervous system. It's how the body communicates and stays in flow. So injecting Botox cuts off nerve communication to a muscle, meaning there's a disruption in the electrical, mechanical, and circulatory flow of that tissue. Your facial muscles are not just there for movement. They play a huge role in circulating the blood and lymph and keeping fascia elastic and mobile and maintaining the tone and lift of the face through these constant micro movements. So when that muscle is paralyzed, it actually starts to atrophy. Any unused muscle will start to shrink over time. And what also happens is circulation slows down. So blood and lymph are not going to flow as freely through the area, which means we're getting less oxygen and nutrients. And then we're also not allowing for proper detoxification. So what this means on the face is the skin tissue is going to become more dull. We're not getting the vibrancy to the tissue. We're not getting what the cells need to thrive. And so they're not going to function properly. Also, when Botox is injected, the fascia, which relies on movement to stay supple, will start to lose mobility. It's going to start to become sticky and compressed, which can actually lead to deeper facial tension and stagnation in other parts of the face. And then you might also see puffiness or dullness or a heavy look to areas that used to feel more sculpted because you've disrupted this natural flow in the terrain. And something else that I just can't shake that I do want to mention is that when we are injecting Botox into that spot between our brows, we're injecting this neurotoxin into the third eye. And the third eye is a center of intuition, inner knowing, perception, consciousness. This area is rich with nerve endings, with acupuncture points, meridian intersections. It's where we hold so much tension, but also where we process insight and even our gut instinct. And I don't bring this up to be dramatic. It's just definitely something that's hard to ignore when you think about it. And then finally, vital energy, which is also called qi, becomes blocked, kind of like a dam. So in Chinese medicine, qi, which is like our energy that flows through our body all the time, it's meant to move. It's what animates us and gives our face its aliveness. And because our face is deeply expressive of our internal states, when we shut down that outward flow, we can also feel it internally because we're creating this energetic stagnation. So what I'm talking about with this is when we paralyze parts of our face, we are going to feel that lack of expression actually internally in our psyche. And that's because our face is different than every other part of our body. Think about it. When you make yourself smile. So I want you to stop what you're doing right now and just smile. And you can feel that smile internally. You can feel it in your heart chakra. And I feel like that's so wild. What's happening with our expression on our face affects us both psychologically and energetically. The tension that's in our face is pretty much always tied to emotional patterns or just chronic ways that we've learned to hold ourselves, like bracing or suppressing emotion or pleasing people by creating a smile. And the body expresses these things through muscle tone, through posture, through the way that we breathe, and again, through our facial expressions. So when we're injecting Botox to freeze a quote unquote problem area, we're not just smoothing the skin. We're cutting off that message that's trying to express itself. We're just completely silencing a signal that's asking to be released or maybe integrated. So if there is an area that you feel like is a problem area, I would invite you to ask yourself, why is there tension there? What is my body trying to say through this pattern? Tension in the jaw might be related to repressed anger or gritting through stress or not feeling safe to speak your truth. Furrowing your brows could come from chronic worry or years of bracing yourself emotionally. So when we're injecting Botox, we're just completely skipping over this process and just shutting the area down. We're bypassing it. And as we do this over and over, we become more disconnected from our body and from its wisdom. We're shutting down our body, trying to express its truth in exchange for this frozen version of who we think we should be. And listen, I'm doing this episode because it's been on my mind. I am seeing aging happen in real time for the first time. My face is actually changing. It's not always looking fresh as a daisy every time I look in the mirror or at a photo of myself, and that's hard. I have lines on my forehead, and I know that these lines are from constantly feeling the need to be on, constantly feeling the need to be producing, always needing control. And I've discovered this from noticing when I'm engaging in the holding patterns in my face that create the lines that I'm seeing. And I've just been taking time to get quiet and turn off outside noise and just noticing what's actually happening in my body. And I will say this act of just like getting quiet and trying to figure out what my body is saying does in this weird way feel like a rebellion. It's so different than what I've been used to, the way that I'm used to orienting to the world, I guess. And it would be really easy to just add some spackle over the cracks and make them smooth. But I really do want to understand why the cracks are happening instead of just adding cosmetic patchwork over the top. And then this is where the nuance comes in, because we also need to remember that faces get wrinkles. They're a part of being alive. They're a part of having expression and emotion, being a human. Your face is allowed to change and you are allowed to age. And so the nuance I'm trying to pull through here is that wrinkles can be this sacred proof of life. But they can also be signs of tension and stress and emotional healing that we've carried for years without realizing it. And it can be both, and it is both. And the problem for me with Botox is that it's not really getting into either of those things. It's just erasing and silencing your body and smoothing over the message without asking what the message is trying to say. And again, this is not about judgment, because I get it. It is hard to look at yourself and see changes. This is really just me thinking out loud about the process and where I land in it right now and offering that different lens to you. So on that note, I would like to get into what are called quote unquote alternatives to Botox. So things like gua sha, acupuncture, herbal support, facial massage. I would say these are not alternatives, but they are antidotes, because Botox is about shutting down movement and stopping feedback. And these practices are all about restoring the connection and bringing back the flow and supporting your body's own intelligence. So they're not really like here's what to do instead of doing Botox. These are the opposite of what Botox does. They're not passive beauty routines. They are therapeutic. They help to unwind the root cause of the tension or stagnation in the first place. And the more that I've worked with these tools, I can tell you it's not really just about changing how your face looks. It's about the vibrancy that comes out from the inside. It's about how you feel in your body. It's truly about, like, when you think of a flower blooming, that's what's happening in your face. The first is gua sha, and gua sha is a practice rooted in ancient Chinese medicine. This was a folk tradition, so a form of medicine that was practiced by the people who couldn't get access to elite medical treatment. And gua sha means scraping rash, and so this would be done with like a coin or a bone, sometimes a stone. And so gua sha is a massage technique where you are creating movement within the tissue. It's basically to bring blood flow to the tissue. And so if you Google body gua sha, you will see like a purple or dark red marking on the body, and this is that blood coming to the surface, breaking up stagnation. This is obviously not practiced with facial gua sha, but the whole point is to work with the stone or a spoon or whatever tool you're using to get the flow of both blood and qi happening in that tissue again. The next one is facial cupping. I love this one because it has so many different benefits. Facial cupping does help with lymphatic movement and blood flow as well. But facial cupping is creating a suction, like a vacuum suction on the skin with a cup. This also comes from ancient Chinese medicine, but was actually practiced in many other cultures as well. It's very widely practiced throughout history. And so what's happening when we're creating this suction is we are creating a tiny micro trauma within the skin, and this puts your body into a healing response where collagen is produced. It's also amazing for supporting hydration of the fascia. I am a big fan. I teach this in my bi-yearly face massage course that I offer live. The next one will be in the fall. I do it in the spring and the fall. But I love this for releasing stagnant areas and boosting vitality without aggressive stimulation. The next is face taping. So this is helping to retrain facial muscles and posture patterns within the face. And so the tape is placed on specific areas of the face where we have muscle shortening happening due to facial expressions. And so the tape actually helps to elongate the muscle and retrain the muscle while you're sleeping, basically. And what I love about face taping is it also creates this little tiny micro lift in the skin. And so it's going to be encouraging the fluid flow below the surface. Some therapies that will help encourage collagen production are things like microneedling and red light therapy. I struggle to say that these are like alternatives to Botox because none of these things are going to freeze your face. But I do think that microneedling and even red light therapy get marketed with maybe a little bit more hype than they should. This is not a quick fix, like you're going to get a new face immediately. They are super supportive to the cellular health. But just be aware that they over time are building collagen, but it's not a quick fix by any means. You will get more immediate results with face massage than with either of these two things. Not to say there's anything bad about microneedling or red light therapy used in the right context. I just want to make sure that you are going into things with your eyes wide open and not having unrealistic expectations. Moving on to things like nervous system regulation, the hottest word on Instagram right now. Practices like breath work, yoga nidra, somatic release, all of these things can help to soften chronic facial tension from the inside out. So this is like a root level antidote to the always on state that's creating tension in our face in the first place. So I'm a big fan of anything that you can do for this. So these are just a few things that I don't necessarily consider trendy wellness swaps. They're more of a way to bring our body back into relationship with itself. So I hope this episode was interesting to you. If so, I would love to hear about it. Reach out to me on Instagram. I always love when people tell me that they listen to the show. It means a lot. Maybe send it to somebody that you care about who also would find it interesting and valuable. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show. I will be back next week, and until then, be well. You've been listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality. If you like what you heard today, consider giving me a 5-star rating. It helps other people just like you to find the show. You can shop products and find all of my offerings on my website, stratumaesthetics.com, and follow me on my social channels at Stratum Aesthetics.